All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Leo, and I'm a recovering alcoholic. How we start this meeting out is with the third step prayer. Rob?
Yeah, I hope everybody's got their big book, a highlighter, a pen, and a piece of paper. Remember, it's a facilitated meeting, so there won't be questions until after the meeting. So if you want to follow along, we're going to be on page 63 of the big book for the third step prayer, everybody. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
All right. Thank you, Rob. We left off on page 37, and I kind of took a look at it, and we'd have to go back 3 or 4 paragraphs in order to kind of capture that message there. So let's go ahead and just start right where we left off, Rob, and that would be at the middle of the page in some circumstances on page 37.
You got it, Leo. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in this type of beginning, we are obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be.
There's a pretty big message in this paragraph here, and I think most of us can actually relate to it. I refer to it, and I actually highlighted a couple of things here. I found myself drinking in anger. When I was trying to justify, if you will, my drinking. I would go out deliberately after getting into an argument or some type of thing where I was frustrated. Maybe I was embarrassed and I had been found out for whatever reason. Remember, if you guys, I was somebody that hid my alcohol and then lied about it. So for good reason, people were upset with me. But I would turn that inward and become angry, and then I would deliberately drink, and there was no thought to it. I was doing the heckets, as I used to say, and I would just pick up a drink and start drinking, and I'd be like, it's and so basically here is that if you were to sit down and talk to me when I was not angry and I was in one of my better, more frame of mind of being kind of calm and collected, there would be, it would be insanely insufficient in the light of what had always happened. And what always happened was the calamity and the debacle, and the consequences would just come tumbling down on top of me, as well as other people. It's not just about me when I'm drinking, it was about the people around me as well. So I think that we've kind of, the idea here is that this premeditation that a lot of people kind of reason out, I've got to take a drink because of this, or I'm going to drink, or I'm not going to drink. I'm going to stay away from it. I'm only going to drink 1 drink. I'm going to drink 3 drinks. I'm only going to drink wine. I'm not going to drink the hard stuff, et cetera, et cetera. All of that goes out the window when you've got your emotions. And that's really what they're trying to say here. When there's emotion involved, you really don't. You just, it's a snap decision. You jump right into it. Consequences be damned, and there you are, and the consequences are there. So I think it's, again, just like I said, and I've kind of, like I highlighted this, I put an asterisk beside it, and I put on both sides of the paragraph me, because this describes me very, very well. And I think it's one that probably describes each one of us at some point in time in our drinking careers the same. Rob?
Yeah, Bill, all through this chapter, is going to be showing us about the malady of the mind, the craziness of taking that first drink, and why do we do it, and the insanity of it all from where it leads us. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years, in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap, having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks, he breaks both his legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work, his wife gets a divorce, and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and then the next sentence there is that you think this illustration is too ridiculous, but the fact is, if you were to apply your drinking shenanigans with this, and I call them that only to say that, in the beginning, as things start to crumble just a little bit on the edges and that type of thing, people start to notice. You start to get the very, friendly comment, don't you think you've had enough? Or maybe today is not a good day for that. Or maybe this is not the right place to start drinking. Is it possible if we go to the birthday party and you don't drink, those type of things? And they're just little subtle reminders. And most of us kind of discount them in some manner or fashion. But then, what you find is that you start to embarrass people around you, maybe unknowingly at first, and then the next thing you know, you're embarrassing yourself. Things may turn to anger, for example, and things get broken, whether that be physical items and or emotions, and then it gets to be these dark days of drinking. And it just, in these two paragraphs, it just kind of shows you the progression of the disease. And really, we're describing the malady here. That inability against that first drink, and that inability to not jaywalk for this particular man that they're describing in these two paragraphs. The bottom line is that it is a progression. It starts out subtle. Maybe you're successful with it for a period of time, but then things start to unravel. And then the next thing you know, it is, and I say this again, the dark days of drinking, where you find yourself alone. People don't want to be around you anymore. You may have lost your job. You may have lost your family. You may have lost your job, et cetera, et cetera. And that we can relate to. Even as absurd as it sounds for this guy that we're describing as jaywalking, but the actual progression and the events are correlated to each other, and I would say to a T. Rob?
Yeah, I love how Bill, now we're going to get into four stories, the Jim, Fred, the man of 30, and the jaywalker, how it illustrates, in different ways, how crazy these people are. And the absurdity that alcohol takes us. You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we've been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true?
Yeah, we'll just keep going, Rob.
Okay. Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to. For we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things could not happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information.
Yeah, this is certainly a very, very common reaction to this, and the idea being is that you get armed with a bit of information and knowledge, and all of a sudden you think you've got it licked, and there's no way that could happen to me, and yet you find yourself on the receiving end of that very thing. And so what I would just say here is that this is that part where you're kind of in the mode of denial, and I think that we've got to kind of talk about that a little bit. In that, when an alcoholic is in that phase of denial, it's a very dangerous time, because there is this idea that you're going to be able to overcome, you can control, and you're going to be fine and normal, when in fact you're not. And what that because that doesn't parallel with each other, it contrasts with each other, that's where the crash is going to happen. And certainly all of us have got a story or 4 or 5 that could tell you about times where you thought you had it licked and you didn't. And you felt like that people talking to you about it was, like they said, thanks for the information. I'll exit over here and start drinking, and I'll show you. So Rob?
Yeah. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. People around us see that we have a problem before we do, and they tell us about it, and we just push them to the side. And what happens is, in my case, I isolated. I just sat in my basement and would drink until pass out, blackout, whatever, time to go to bed, and it wasn't much of a life, so that was the big thing for me, is that the isolation. What type of life am I living? I'm surviving, but that's it. And everybody's bottom is different. My bottom and Shane's bottom are going to be different. It's not necessarily what we lose. It's the people around us that we don't have around anymore, because, they've gone to do their own thing. We later on in the book, it talks about, regaining the family. And that mother has been wearing the trousers for so long because dad's been, in his cups. He can't be relied upon anymore. So the family carries on without us, and that's a sad part. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate, because their brains and bodies had not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our readers, as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. Let us take another illustration.
Yeah, before we jump into that, absolutely. I mean, those darn people that are able to drink even heavily and be able to stop and moderate, how dare them? The point is that, well, absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. And it is so true. The fact is, you've got to really dig in. You've got to find that higher power. You've got to get that inner strength, and you've got to be able to tap into that in order to be able to stop your drinking and move forward with recovery. Until you do that, you're going to be doomed a repeat of one debacle after another. Rob?
Yeah, remember Bill tried to quit on self-knowledge. Roland thought that he knew so much by going to see Carl Jung. He knew so much about the inner springs, of his mind, that, he had this thing licked. Little did he realize that self-knowledge won't fix it. Also, anytime there's squiggly writing in this book, they paid extra for that, so it must be really important. So, please, they didn't have a lot of money when they wanted to get this book published. So for them to spend the extra to get the squiggly writing, we really need to pay attention. In fact, I'm going to read it one more time. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. And they wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home the idea that self-knowledge won't fix it. Here we come into another case study. I love case studies. It brings these people to life. That's just what I love about Bill's writing. Not only does he give us examples, he could have kept it to the medical fraternity and his experience, but here he's bringing in case studies just to bring it home that much more. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home, is happily married, and a father of promising children of college age. He is so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearances, he is a stable, well-balanced individual. Yet, he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed about it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so, in spite of his character and standing. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. We told him what we knew of alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it.
Yeah, well, that's basically setting the stage to show, in fact, that self-knowledge won't fix it. This is just one example. I think it's really good that most of us can relate to the beginning of this paragraph where he's of income is good. He's got a home, happily married, family, children, doing quite well, and somebody that is well liked and people enjoy being around them and their company. That certainly describes all of us in this room at one time or another. So bottom line is that we've got someone that on the surface appears to have everything under control. Yet what we have is the dark secret, which is that this person is alcoholic and unable to control his drinking, even though now that he has, quote, calmed his nerves and gone to a hospital for a period of time to try and dry out, he thinks now that because, and this is that misnomer, we've all been successful. We all know that we have had some control over our lives and we've done good with that control going forward. So why not? Why couldn't we be able to control our drinking, much like we've been able to control other things and other facets of our life? Fact of the matter is we've got a disease, and we can't do this through self-knowledge. So the bottom line is that we've got a great guy, dark secret, thinks that he can now, because of this event that he's gone to a hospital, he's been humiliated, he's embarrassed by the whole thing, that now he's going to be able to stop and control his drinking, or stop altogether in his case. Yet I think we're going to find out different. Rob?
Yeah, this Fred, his real name, Harry Brick. He had a story in the first edition called A Different Slant. And he got sober in June 1938, but he drank again. This goes to show that self-knowledge won't fix it. Again, bringing out this point again. And this is what I love about Bill's writing again, is that he tells us over and over again. He mentions it back here. He mentions it again, because we don't always get it the first time. So we got to hammer home the point. Self-knowledge will not fix it. Bill tried it. Roland tried it. And poor Harry Brick, he tried it too. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day, we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time, he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet was flat on his back, nevertheless.
Yeah, Rob, we'll just keep going here.
Okay.
It's really just a good example of what we were just saying about how you've got control over a vast amount of your life, yet there's this one area that you just have no control. And again, we're going to get into a paragraph here where it's a very good description of the malady.
And also, notice all the I's that Fred uses here. Okay? Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism. And I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been unusually successful. I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problem, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard.
Yep, the big lie, I guess, if you want to call it that, with regard to you were lying to yourself in regards to this particular area of your life. And we're seeing it firsthand with Fred. So we'll just keep going, Rob.
Yeah, no problem. In this frame of mind, I went about my business for a time. All was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I'd been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day, I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I'd been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon.
Yet there was a cloud, but we're about to find out. So anyway, we'll keep going, Rob.
Okay. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. Here we go with squiggly writing, everybody. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering.
Yeah, when this guy fell, he really fell hard. This is a great demonstration of the powerlessness of alcohol and the power that it has over us. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. Again, we're talking about the emotion here. He just didn't give it much thought at all, just decided he was okay, everything was going good. And in this case, he was just going to have a couple of drinks with dinner, and that would be that. Little knowing that after not having the strength to not have those drinks, then once he started having the drinks, then the allergy kicks in and he can't stop. Then comes the point in time where he's fully into it and is probably just coherent enough to be able to maneuver back and forth from, let's just say, from one bar to the next, from one hotel to the next, and back and forth between the cab driver and another drink. This, like I said, when this guy fell, he fell hard. Rob?
Yeah, I just want to go back to a couple of things. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. You know, we're told in the rooms, or I've been told in the room, to look out for halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Does this sound like he was going through this? No, it doesn't. You know, everything was going well. We drink whether it's a good day or a bad day, because that's what we do. We are alcoholics. We drink whether it's a good day or a bad day. You know, here he is. He has a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York. He's in and out of a blackout. You know, he has no idea. And this is what I love about New York. You can always find a friendly taxi driver that'll take you around everywhere for a couple of days. You know, not just, you know, he's going to take you to one place, drop you off, take his money and go. He's staying with him, you know, looking after him, making sure he's safe and sound and nothing bad's going to happen. You know, from my friend Bill from New Jersey has always said that these taxi drivers in New York, they know where to get everything that you need. Whatever you want, they know where to get it, and they'll take you to whatever you want, whatever your drug of choice, your drink of choice, whatever you want, they can help you find it. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. And Squiggly writing. Not only had I been off guard, I made no fight whatsoever against the first drink. This time, I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, and they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come, I would drink again. They had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. What I'd learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow.
Yeah, this is a person coming to terms with his alcoholism and basically describing the malady and the allergy in his own words. The first part of this, not only had I been off guard, I'd made no fight whatever against that first drink. And this time I had not thought of the consequences at all. We were just talking about the fact that we don't do a lot of premeditated thinking when it comes to drinking. And so a great example here of a person that just basically said, having a great day, I'm having a couple of drinks, and the next thing you know, he's lost in New York for several days. Again, we talk about the malady, and then and again, we talk about the allergy here in that in the description of this story. But he also gets to the point. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then, and it was a crushing blow. He's finally getting to the point where he's ready to do his step one, kind of admitting defeat, admitting the fact that he was powerless over alcohol. And as you can see here, it is a painful revelation for this man to come to terms with that kind of beginning with regard to step one. Rob?
Yeah, hopeless. Cannot stop on my own. Drinking even though I don't want to. One thing I did want to bring up, and I forgot to bring it up the last time I was talking, was that the thought, as I crossed this threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. Remember when Bill was at the hotel, he thought also, I'll go into the bar and have a ginger ale. No, I haven't had a drink for 6 months. I can probably go in and have 2, maybe 3 drinks. But what did Bill do instead? He went to the telephone and thought about the other alcoholics. Step 12. Okay, what will keep us sober? Helping another alcoholic will do it more than anything else. 2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself.
Yeah, and this is just really just saying how powerless he is. He's admitting it. He's realizing it. He's getting good descriptions to kind of relate to. And that is another plug for the fact that one alcoholic can actually win over another alcoholic within just a short period of time. And the idea here is that we've all been there, we've all done that, and we all have very similar experiences, even if we feel like that, we haven't, we really, really have. And I also want to point out, just as a plug for this particular room, we're from all over the world, and we can all relate to the same kind of experiences as well. Rob?
I love how it says that they grinned. You know why? Because we look at each other and go, yeah, we've been there. Yeah, I know exactly how I felt, brother. I know. And that's why we can grin. Why? Because we know that there is a solution. We know we had a problem. We know the solution, and we know the course of action now. So we know there's a way out. This man does not know that there's a way out yet, because he thought he could do the job all by himself. Then they outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcohol condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be.
Yep, this is a great paragraph to kind of describe the step two of our process. And they outline the spiritual answer and the program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. And I think it's worth noting, I mean, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that have successfully gone through this program. And so I just as another aside here, you know, when this book was written, there had already been several people that had been able to do this successfully. And now we're about to watch one more person grab hold of this and be able to recover from alcoholism. And he also says it's though entirely sensible was pretty drastic. It is kind of a drastic thing. There is work that has to be done and things have to change. And there's a lot of change that has to happen in regard to that. But you really, like I've said before, got to dig deep and find that inner strength. Rob?
Yeah, it meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcohol condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. So step 2 is the solution and the course of action to take, steps 3 to 12. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moment for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could.
Yeah, so this person is finally, you know, realizing the discovery that the spiritual principles would solve all of his problems, and I've since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. He is really working on his resentments, his anger, and his fears, and things like that. And we'll find out as we go forward how to kind of maneuver all of that while you're kind of going through the process of recovery. He also makes the comment, and I've heard this time and again, his best moments, I would not exchange his best moments for the worst that I have now. And so what you've basically got is somebody that has completely changed their life and for the better. Rob?
Yeah, changing our life, our ideas, our thoughts, our emotions. Instead of thinking that we are God and that we can control everything in life, we realize that we can't. And that's where we change. Being selfish and self-centered most of our lives. We did everything to please ourselves, okay? Or doing things for other people, expecting something in return. Now we do things for other people because it's the right thing to do and because we want to. And that's what it's all about. We change our whole way of thinking and which then change the way we act. People around us notice it way before we do. Okay? But that's what it's, when we give, we get. It's a great feeling inside. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had felt only the first nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve the problem. Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, staff member of a world-renowned hospital, recently made this statement to some of us. What you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. As to two of you men whose stories I've heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless, apart from divine help. Had you offered yourselves as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution.
So this doctor is Dr. Percy Pollock. And we're talking, of course, about Bill, and in the second person here is Fitzmayo that he's referring to. And I think the important point here, and this is from the very first part of what Rob was reading, most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problem. The consequences bring you to AA, and it's when those consequences are insurmountable at a point in time that you finally get to that point where you're ready to listen. You're ready to delve into the solution that we've got as a part of this program. Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that Bill from New Jersey, who is here, always says. You know, if you put less in front of hope, so you have less hope, you still have hope. But here they're talking about hopeless. They have no hope whatsoever, you know, and, you know, other than spiritual help, you know, we have to remember that. Hopeless. Okay. We have no hope whatsoever. Once more, and this is what I love about Bill's writing again. Once more, in case you didn't get it the last 4 times that he's mentioned it, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power.
Absolutely. And we're talking about you know, no other nor any other human being, not self, not sponsor, friend, spouse, etc. They just can't bring you to that and provide the defense that's necessary against the mental twist that comes with that first drink, and then in that case the allergy kicking in and another debacle. You can't fix self with self. Rob?
No, and the solution, its defense must come from a higher power. That's the solution right there. And it's the first time the book mentions higher power on that page. Leo, now we're going to go into We Agnostics, one of the best written chapters that I think has been written. It's an incredible piece of writing here.
Yep. And so what I'd like to say here before we get here, and this is really a chapter to change your mind. The purpose thus far that we've been going through is really kind of steps 1 and 2 of the problem and the solution. So we're going to be kind of going beyond that now as we kind of go through the rest of the book. And I think that the other thing too is that there's a series of kind of questions in the first paragraph here, and in that case we're going to again describe the malady and the allergy, and in essence you want to answer yes to the 5 questions that you'll find in this first chapter. This first paragraph, and we'll highlight those after Rob is finished reading.
Leo, you are so right. And the whole idea about this chapter is to change our belief systems in our mind. You know, and this is on the page I'm going to read here, page 44 is the last page that talks about alcoholism. Everything else is going to be talking about the human dilemma. So, we agnostics. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer.
Yeah, and so this is going to be when we talk about this spiritual experience, we're talking about a complete psychic change. And just briefly, I'll go over the questions that are in here. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. Yes. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. That's the second question. Yes. And then if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, that's number 3. Or if when you're drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, that's number 4, you are probably alcoholic. Those are questions you would ask yourself. If that be the case, then you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Yes, that's the 5th question that they actually are asking in this first paragraph here. So just some things there to kind of think in terms of as a sponsor, you might want to take this first paragraph and break it down for a newcomer or a sponsee, and basically just say, here's where we are at this point when we get to it. And have we learned something about alcoholism? Well, yes, we have. It's a great, nice review to make sure that the person that you're working with at this point is ready to move forward into this next chapter. And as we talked about, as a change of your belief system and in your mind. So I just point those things out because I think this is a great way to kind of segue into this, to kind of summarize what you've learned very quickly and succinctly, and use this first paragraph as that part to do it. Rob?
Beautifully put, Leo. Thank you. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. But to continue as he means disaster. He is. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face.
Yeah. We're talking about step one here, just real quickly, and to be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. And they are, in fact, areas of your life that you have to face and you have to acknowledge. The other thing I'd also make a point here, and that is that we're not exaggerating when we are talking about an alcoholic death. This is very serious. Alcoholics of the most advanced kind have done a lot of damage to their minds and their bodies, and that in and of itself can create a circumstance of an early death. And alcohol certainly does take the lives of many people on a daily basis. So that is not a far-fetched and or too drastic of a statement there. This is a very serious thing. Rob?
Okay, Leo, I just want to go and do a little bit of what is an agnostic and what is an atheist. Now, on page 10 of your big book, Bill gives us a description of what an atheist is. And because Bill's talking about himself, I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. So that's the atheist. Now, an agnostic is without knowledge of God. So ag is without, gnostic is knowledge of God. So I just wanted to throw that in for people who aren't sure, because we're going to be talking about those terms quite a bit. But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. Perhaps it is going to be that way with you, but cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted.
Yeah, it's a great way to kind of segue into this. Time and again, I see people they raise their hand, they talk, they say that the first mention of God turned them off and they were on their way out the door and not really willing to listen to what we have to say and to offer with regard to this program. Point here is what Bill is doing is saying, I acknowledge the fact that people get turned off by the word God and the idea around that, but hang on for just a minute, relax. You shouldn't be so disconcerted with it. We're going to help you understand that this isn't necessarily God in the traditional sense where it's attached to a religion, such as Catholicism or etc. The bottom line is that we're talking about a spiritual experience, and more accurately, and I mean this sincerely, more accurately, we're talking about a higher power. We're talking about a power that is bigger than you. And what it has done traditionally is there is a lot of people out there that just turn around and they want to refer to it as God, and that's okay. They don't mean it in any other way than that. So I'm probably getting a little off here, but if somebody's pushing God really hard at you and is giving you no other alternative with regard to a definition and or a description, there's probably something wrong with the individual, okay, not with the program itself. And so I think it's important to make that distinction here. And I think the other part of it is really the distinction between religion and spirituality. We are actually talking about the spiritual side of things and not religious, even though they are correlated or related, and that there are religious undertones, certainly. But the point being is that we are really wanting to tap into that, quote, higher power, and it's a spiritual thing, not a religious thing. Rob?
Yeah, a lot of people come into the fellowship and their idea of God is based on when they were a child. And they were taught that God is a punishing God. God wants nothing but, you're going to go to hell if you do that. It was used to control children. And so we come in with the idea that God is punishing. He doesn't really care for me. I'm nothing but bad. Remember, Bill he had to push aside these prejudices too. Okay. And that's why they said to Bill, come up with your own conception of what you want God to be. Who is God? What type of God do you want in your life? Well, I want somebody that's got my back, that's going to care about me, wants nothing but the best for me. Is going to push me forward, not backwards. It's always wants nothing but the best for me. So that's why we have to get rid of our old prejudices, push them to the side, come up with a new conception, a new idea. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly.
Absolutely. And this is a great finalizing paragraph. It's the last discussion we're going to have on, quote, alcoholism. It also is, at least the last time we mention it, and that we, again, as Rob put it, the human dilemma will be covering very much for the rest of the time. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us no matter how much we tried. And that is that self-will, really trying to will it to end and to be able to control it. And we're finding that we can't. And it's so frustrating when you find yourself in a situation when you can't do that. And yet here you are looking around at all of the other successes in your life. And yet this is the one area where you can't do that, and you're having a real trouble reconciling that. So the power, the needed power just wasn't there. Our human resources, and this is really important, our human resources as marshaled by the will were not sufficient. They failed utterly. And we're going to find out why, and we're going to find out how going forward. Right?
They failed utterly. I cannot create the change necessary. And that's the big problem there. I cannot create the change necessary by myself. Here's one of the strongest paragraphs in the book. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously, but where and how were we to find this power?
Exactly. And we're going to answer that exact question. That's one of the other things about the book is that Bill always answers these questions, and we're going to do it very specifically. But again, lack of power was our dilemma, and we had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. And we'll figure this out. Rob?
Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we're going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problem and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God, where we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had nearly evaded or entirely ignored.
Right. And this is just really just another, well, this is just relating to what we had already said earlier. The mention of God actually will turn people off. And I just tell you this to hang in there, to relax. The fact is, we're talking about people that do refer to their higher power as God. But you as an individual can do that, and or you can refer to your higher power as your higher power. It doesn't have to be God. And in fact, from a religious standpoint, it is not. And but from a very spiritual standpoint, you can do so. Rob, you're on mute, Rob.
Boy, I just said the most intelligent thing I've ever said in my whole life, and you guys all missed it. Because the dogs bark here, and I try to mute them, but I'm sorry, everybody. Yeah. Oh well. There's the shortest sentence in the book, obviously, goes along with amen, which is on page 76, and nonsense, which is on page 96. They're the one word sentences. That's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problems. Sounds easy, sounds simple. How difficult do we make these? We try to make it really difficult. But its face falls when we speak of spiritual matters. As I said, we have to set aside our prejudices against what we have been taught, come up with our own conception. Who do you want God to be in your life? It'll make things a little bit easier. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. We looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We looked askance at many individuals who claimed to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost.
Yes, and really just another good paragraph describing the feelings and the position of people as they are starting their journey to recovery, and thinking in terms of this rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. The idea behind that. I certainly was one of those that as a child was given the wrong impression of God and religion. I've told my story in the past. I won't do it today, but the point being is that I had come to look at God as being something bad and not worthy of following. And I was bothered by it. I didn't like and or want to come to terms with God. Now I have come to terms with my higher power, and that inner strength that's bigger than myself. It's all enveloping, and I say that I describe it as being completely enveloped, as if you were in the deep end of a pool and completely surrounded by water underneath the water there and stuff. And that's what happens to me on a regular basis when I'm really tapping into my higher power. And for most of you, you'll know I will almost always call it my higher power. I don't refer to it as God. And that's just in part to not turn somebody off, including myself, but also to stay with really what the book is trying to impress upon us, and that is truly the higher power. Again, you can call it God, and that is great. But that's we're talking about a higher power here. Rob?
Yeah, let's bring Bill from New Jersey in.
Absolutely.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey.
Hi,
Thanks a
Bill.
lot, guys, you did a real good job. This is a very, very important part of the book here, and a very, very good presentation you guys did. We started off, the book was using an analogy of a jaywalker, and the Bill was using that to try to explain alcoholism. He's trying to show us the insanity, the crazy things that we do, and we usually don't see anything wrong with it. And he's using a jaywalker as an example, because when we look at a jaywalker that's getting hit by cars and trucks and fire engines or whatever, we realize that that person is crazy. And then he turns it around and says, we can substitute jaywalking for alcoholism. And then we're supposed to be able to look at ourselves. And he also talks in that chapter about self-knowledge. Self-knowledge does not work. Just because I know I'm an alcoholic is not going to stop me from drinking. If I know what's wrong with me, it doesn't fix me. If I fall down the stairs and I hurt my arm and I go to the doctor and I say my arm hurts, and the doctor takes an x-ray and he says, okay, your arm is broken. Now I have self-knowledge. I can walk out of the doctor's office. No, all that self-knowledge does, it tells me what kind of treatment I need, and the doctor has to set the arm or put it in a cast or whatever the procedure they do to fix it. But self-knowledge itself does not do anything. Just because I know what's wrong with me, it doesn't fix me. Then it talks about this guy, Fred, and it's trying to show you the insanity. This guy did not want to drink. He knew if he drank, he was going to lose his, he was going to wind up in the asylum again or whatever. He didn't want to drink, and he's sitting in going to dinner, and he gets this nutty idea in his head, a cocktail would be nice, or a highball or whatever would be nice with dinner. And he thinks he's just going to have one. And once we start, we can't stop. And then he's walking around, he takes a walk, he has another one, then he's getting on an airplane, going in and out of a blackout, and he winds up drinking all night, and he shows up somewhere in New York, and instead of getting in the meeting his wife, he finds a taxi cab driver that drives him around all the place. And like Rob said, if you go over to New York, whatever you want, the taxi driver's job is to take you where you want it. You don't even have to give them an address. Tell them what you want. You want an after-hours place? You want drugs? You want sex? You want anything you want. They know where it is, and they will take you there. And as long as you still got money, that taxi cab driver will stay with you. And this guy was some kind of a business guy, and he probably had a whole bunch of credit cards and a big expense account, and I'm sure that taxi driver spent every cent that he had. So that's what will happen to you. And then right at the end of this, in the last paragraph, once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Once more, he's telling us again, he's telling us we don't have a mental defense. We think we can outsmart alcoholism. We think we can think the drink through. Something short circuits in our brain and makes us drink against our will. And it tells us here, his defense must come from a higher power. Like Rob said, this is the first time they use higher power in the book, and that's just a different term that Bill uses, and most people would call it God. Now he's saying higher power because he doesn't want to, he uses a whole bunch of different terms all throughout the book. Sometimes he says Father of Lights, Spirit of the Universe, whatever. He uses all different terms throughout this book, and higher power was one of them. Then we went into the next chapter, We Agnostic. Right on the first page, in that first paragraph, they have basically the best description of alcoholism that I've heard. If when you honestly want to, you cannot quit entirely. That means you try to stop and you can't stay stopped. That's showing us the mental part of this disease. Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take. You take a drink, you develop the phenomenon of cravings, and you can't control how much you drink. That's the physical part. Basically, what he did here, he's giving us a description of alcoholism, and then he says you are probably alcoholic. The book can't pronounce anyone an alcoholic. They're just saying that you're probably an alcoholic if one of those things or both of those things happens to you. Because according to this book, I have to admit that I'm an alcoholic to do step one. I have to admit I'm powerless over alcohol. The book can't admit it for me. So he says you're probably alcoholic. He's trying to push you into admitting it yourself. That's basically what this is doing. And in this chapter here, we agnostics, I mean, this is one of the best chapters in this book. Bill wrote this, and Bill had absolutely no spiritual training, no theological schooling. He didn't go through any of that kind of stuff. The only thing he had up until he was like 11 years old, he went to Sunday school, which really doesn't teach you that much, or whatever they taught him in Sunday school. And then he stopped going when he was 11 years old. And when Bill had his spiritual experience in the town's hospital, something happened to him. I don't know exactly what it was, but something happened. He changed. He turned into someone who was more interested in helping other people than he was interested in making money for himself. And he came up with all of these spiritual ideas that are written here in this book. And it's some of the best things that I've ever read on spirituality. And right on page 41, where it says, lack of power was our dilemma, that could be a reference to step one. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol. It's telling us lack of power. That's our dilemma. A dilemma is when you're like stuck between a rock and a hard place. Whichever way you go, it's not going to work. So he's telling us that's our dilemma, is lack of power. And then he's telling us that we have to find a power greater than ourselves. And then he tells us that's exactly what this book is about. He's giving us a description of what the book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That's what the purpose of this book is. Purpose of the book is to enable the reader to find a power greater than themselves. And that's what the people did. The first 100, they all found a power greater than themselves. Whatever it was, my power could be different than your power. It makes no difference what you use, whatever you describe, as long as it's not you. That's basically what he's trying to tell us here. And that's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate it.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Bill.
we'll close things out with the Serenity Prayer, Rob, and then we'll open it up for some discussion.
You got it, Leo. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.